the BMS program at the Indian Institute of Kozhikode.
Our director is very clear that this is one of our star programs and we will not leave any stone unturned.
Could you share the vision behind the launching of the BMS program?
We're not just prepping them for working in this country, it's just for the entire world.
What exactly is the academic rigor we are expecting here?
We're trying to make them or, sort of groom them to be independent learners.
It is also to be able to have the right attitude.
IIMK, such a prestigious name.
Management is an attitude. It is not just a set of processes and a skill set. Do you have that attitude?
Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. This is Sanika Mate, your friend, your mentor and your guide, welcoming everyone to the yet another session, the Career Campus session, where we answer all your questions. We make sure that you get the answers directly from the horse's mouth, okay? And in today's episode, we are going to talk about one of the most exciting new undergraduate opportunities in management, which a lot of you were very excited about when the students heard about it. So the BMS program at the Indian Institute of Kozhikode. If you are a student exploring management studies after class 12th, a lot of you are not even aware that you have the opportunity of studying in the hallows of IIM right after 12th. And for a lot of them, that's a dream. Okay, but this particular dream can definitely turn into reality with IIMK. All right, and none other than I should be speaking is none other than IIM Kozhikode. Okay, you have probably heard about the program. I'm not sure, but if you have, good, you're doing good. You definitely have your research on point there. But in case if you have not heard about it, this is one of the opportunities which you have after 12th, which you definitely shouldn't miss. Okay, it will give you a lot more than you can imagine in the undergraduate section. Okay, so one of the few opportunities where students can begin their management journey, as I said, right after the 12th standard. Now, what exactly this program is all about? This is a question which I get from all the parents. Ma'am, what it is all about? Or the parents who are not aware that IIM right after 12th is really an opportunity. They feel it's too good to be true. How this particular program is different from a typical BBA or undergraduate program degree, and what kind of learning experiences which you can expect from IIM Kozhikode. To help us understand all of this, we have three distinguished guests from IIM Kozhikode itself joining us today. First, we have Professor Silpa Satheesh, the chairperson of the BMS program, who has been closely involved in designing and shaping this undergraduate program. We are also joined by Professor Anandakuttan B, Unnithan, Professor of Marketing Management and Dean Program of IIM Kozhikode, who brings extensive experience in management, education, and research. And we are also joining them, Professor Venkataraman S, the Associate Dean of the IIM Kochi Campus, who plays a key role in the development and growth of IIM Kozhikode's Kochi Campus. In today's conversation, we will be exploring the vision behind the BMS program, its academic structure, the opportunity which it is offering to the students, and also how it will prepare the students with the ever-evolving world of business and leadership. All right. So if you're considering a management career after 12th, this particular conversation will offer you some very valuable insight, which I'm sure will help you decide a lot better. So let's get started. Hello, Anand sir, Venkataraman sir, and Silpa ma'am. Thank you so much for taking out time and doing this particular session for us. My students and the parents have a lot of questions in their mind, and I'm sure after the episode, they will get a lot of good, clear clarity. So my first question is about the program vision and introduction of this particular program. Okay. BMS and BBA program is something which is offered by a lot of universities in India. We have IPM programs as well, but IIMK, such a prestigious name. To begin with, could you share the vision behind the launching of the BMS program at the Indian Institute of Management at Kozhikode?
As you told, we have a large number of degree programs, and most of them are legacy programs. They worked in the past, but many of them had to wait and complete their undergrad degree before they could aspire to learn a professional program in management, which would equip them to take up a job role. So what we thought is, why not we create a program, we invent a program which would allow a student after their plus two to straight away take up management. Why do they have to spend 4 years in learning mechanical engineering? Why do they have to learn 3 years in studying psychology? So if they are interested, why not they learn management at an early age so that they have more time to imbibe the fundamental principles of management? We will also get more time to mold them rather than just a 2 year program where they come already with a lot of experiences and with a set mental models. So here is an opportunity so that we can catch them young. That is a key word, is it not? So even if you look at Indian cricket team, we are talking about 16-year-olds trying to make a debut rather than 30-year-olds. So why not we allow, if not 16-year-old, 17 and 18-year-olds to make a debut into the management education? This is what prompted this thought. Because in India, even though we have a lot of programs, if somebody doesn't want to do a BTech or let's say an LLB or a CA or maybe a medical course, there are not many professional programs that are available which would get them to be ready for a career, which would promote job skills. So we thought, with around 29 years of experience in running a lot of different programs at the master's level and also at the executive master's level, why not we put together our heads? Why not we learn from all our experiences and design something new? So we thought, let us invent the future rather than allow the future to evolve by itself and then responding to that. And again, if you see, we are witnessing the kind of radical change which IT industry witnessed in 90s or automobile
True.
industry witnessed 2 decades back. Education was to some extent protected from many of these disruptive changes. Now we find that our sector is also opening up. So when
Right.
education sector is also opening up, we need to have newer offerings so that we can capitalize on this gap in the market. So we imagine this program to be a combination of three broad themes. One is about logic and data. So we want to inculcate a structured, analytical, logical thinking so that they are able to work with the data, they are able to work with complex situations, and they are able to be problem solvers. This is one of the important themes. In fact, even before we identified a single course, we drafted a vision, which is three overlapping circles. One is this logic and data. We said this program would enable our students to be comfortable, proficient in applying logic and working with the data. The second theme that we identified is that we want them to learn and benefit from humane studies. Because management is not being an analyst alone. Management is not simply spreadsheet modeling. Management is about making things happen by working with the people, learning about what India is and learning about the other half of India, which is Bharat. So we wanted to have a sensitivity towards the culture, about people, about life as it is lived in India. So we thought this program, it will not be simply a job-oriented training, but instead we will have a lot of courses. Say, for example, Professor Shilpa is teaching them sociology in their first semester. We have a course called Poetry and Literature. So people will ask, why should somebody learn poetry and literature?
Absolutely.
Why should somebody learn psychology? Why should somebody learn yoga and meditation? So this is to sensitize a student, make them see the world from multiple lenses rather than as simply number crunchers. Because tomorrow's management is making things happen, and for that, they need to have a different orientation compared to simply technical expert. The third aspect of our vision is big thinking, because problems do not come neatly packaged into marketing problems or finance problems or manufacturing problems. Either you are a manager or you are not. Either you are a leader or you are not. So if you ask me, I would say one of the most important ability that any person, let alone a manager, must have is an ability to see the whole picture. So you can call it holistic thinking. You can call it big thinking. You can call it having a helicopter vision of the world, but at the same time being grounded. So we call it the kind of conceptual skill. And we have several courses which would allow them to see a complete picture of a problem, of an organization, and work for the betterment of whatever they are working for. So we started this vision. And once we started this vision, with this vision, we found out that what all should enable, what all should aid this vision, what inputs, what kind of methodologies of teaching, what kind of evaluation methods, what kind of exposure is necessary. So probably BMS will be a very different program. It doesn't fit into the mold of a BBA or a BCom or any other undergraduate program or even an IPM. That's why we thought, let us do a different name, which at that time, which was quite unique, Bachelor of Management Studies, so that when someone hears Bachelor of Management Studies or BMS, they don't get influenced by the set expectations that they have about what do they learn in BCom, what do they learn about BBA. So now many other institutions are following our nomenclature, and we believe that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. But then still, I believe they will not be able to take away our vision, because the vision comes from the team who is committed to doing something very different. So this probably is kind of like a group of people spend almost an year together. And before a curriculum got formed, before we thought of the admission policy, this idea takes shape in our minds, right? So we give birth to BMS in our mind, not just three of us, but then there are many people, and gathering a kind of like a commitment and a conviction that this is worth doing, which is a culmination of the total experience of all of us in IIM Kozhikode, which we are so fortunate to see it now being in the first batch. I don't know whether I have kind of elaborated too much on it, but then this is something that is very close to my heart. And if you ask me about the BMS and the vision, then I think I may be able to speak. I'll find it very difficult to stop early. Maybe you can take up other questions.
No, I think that was very in depth. It clearly shows that, when you are a part of something and you're so passionate about it, okay, this is something what students would want to know. When faculty itself is so passionate about the program and the delivery of the program, I am very certain the outcome of the program would be equally good, sir. Okay, but Professor Venkat and Professor Silpa, would you like to add anything else with what Professor Anand have mentioned?
Um, I think Professor Anand has pretty much captured, especially from the vision perspective. All I would add, probably going forward, because that question might be there in your mind, that how this may be different from a typical BBA or an IPM. And I think,
That exactly what was my next question.
okay. So the thing is, often when you say, like you said, when you say BCom or a BBA or a BBA or a BA rolling into an IPM kind of thing, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is after some time, right? And especially in an IPM, or if you talk about a BBA, it still leaves something hanging as to what do you do after that. You still need to top up with something else to do something professional, right? And that is what we are essentially trying to address here. Every course that we do within the BMS program is trying to orient itself to the goal or the vision that at the end of the program, at the end of 4 years, they are going to be job ready in a professional way in the in the context of management, right? Otherwise, like you said, you do engineering, you do BCom, you do BSc, and then you do an MBA, and then you get ready for the big world. Whether they have experience or not have experience doesn't seem to matter. You still need to have something to top up before you, sort of get into the realm of thinking about managing something, right? And that is what we are trying to address here. That we try to connect the dots right from the beginning, and that's where the vision sort of leads to, the structure, the way in which we approach it, and so on. That's all I would add.
Amazing. Professor Silpa, would you like to add something to that?
No, I think they have both covered it very well. I don't have anything more to add on that.
Okay. Now, my next question is for those students who feel that, see, when I speak to students, it's a joke that 90% of my students are really underconfident and they don't feel that they can really make it. Okay. With the push of parents, they will be like, okay, fine, we will give it a try. So, zindagi abhi tak unki, jaise main hamesha bolti hu, underconfidence mein hi ji rahe hain mere bacche, right? But right now, what we are looking at, if a student is looking forward to join the IIMK program, okay, this is a question which a student would ask. Am I really the right one or the right fit for this? So my next question is very simple. Who should really opt for this particular program?
Ideally, I would want to take everybody who applies, but then we have limitations of there is a batch strength of 120, and we might get
Right.
a few thousand applications. So, in a way, I would ask them, allow us to make a judgment, to make a thorough diagnosis, and allow us to decide. And we have quite a lot of experience in conducting similar admission processes for many academic programs, and we are rarely wrong. Now, whom is it for? One, those who want to look at a career path in business, someone who's not simply looking at just a job so that they will get a salary. So, who's interested in business, interested in management? And business and management are activities that are conducted in the society, and they are influenced by whatever that happens in the society. So, people who are not very happy with a very structured role, a job role, within the confines of the job description, but someone who wants to make a difference, someone who might want to create employment opportunities, someone who might want to life a little better. So people who think beyond a job, of course they will get a job, but they look at a job as an opportunity to make a difference. So this will be the kind of candidate whom we are looking at, who likes talking to people, who are interested in human beings, not someone who's only concerned about reading and then learning what is there in the books, but someone who looks every other human being as a kind of like a book, someone who always keeps thinking, who questions everything they see. And those with a pleasant disposition, good communication skills, right? And who is also having a little bit of discontentment in their mind. So that, no, we need to be better. I need to be better. The world needs to be better. So this is the kind of profiles we are looking for. Who is fit for that? Anybody is fit for that. Management is an attitude. It is not just a set of processes and a skill set. Do you have that attitude? They are the ones who make this world go around, and they are the ones who ensure that we enjoy a kind of like a quality of living. So we are looking at their mindset, their attitudes, their ambition, their aspiration. That's what we are looking at. And that can-do attitude. That is what we are looking at. Of course, we believe that somebody who has completed a +2 should be rather proficient in whatever they study, so that they will be able to read numbers, they will know a little bit of mathematics. They are able to read, they are able to write, and they know what's happening around them. So now it's a competitive process out there, and we are looking at who is the best among all those people. So I don't know. I hope, Professor Shilpa, would you like to add something based on your experience in teaching semester 1 students? What kind of people do we have there? What do you find different about them compared to the students whom you have met in your PhD days?
Sure. Thank you, Professor Unnithan. So the first batch is incredibly energetic and they're highly motivated. They would want to learn quite a lot. And what I find striking is that this curiosity is not limited by their existing beliefs. They are willing to move beyond that. And I think that's what we are also looking for, right? Cannot have everything set in stone. You need to have this mindset where you're willing to push it forward and think outside of the box a little. So that is something I'm seeing. And anyone joining the program can expect a vibrant, collaborative, and very intellectually stimulating environment in the existing batch. And that largely stems from the fact that they're not limiting themselves to what they already held as beliefs. So they're willing to push it further. They're willing to explore new ideas. And to put it briefly, they're willing to make the familiar strange and the strange familiar. And that's something I stand by as I teach this particular batch. And this is something that I'm looking forward to future students as well. Be curious. And you don't have to have a business management background. That's okay. But be curious enough and willing enough to explore new ideas as they come your way. That's all.
My professors tell me that they are not at all easy to manage, and we don't want them to be easy to manage. We are not looking for raw materials for the manufacturing system we have, and we don't design an assembly line. This is something like people come together and then they explore, and sometimes they challenge us. Sometimes we don't have all the answers, and they grow. All right. Sometimes they may crib a little bit. That's fine. Absolutely no problem. But then they learn and they become better. So as long as they become a better version of themselves when they join, we are happy with it.
Absolutely, Professor. Couldn't have said that well. Yeah.
Both of you have said something so good. I have mentally made a note of it. Okay, when you said, Professor Anand, that management is an attitude. Okay, it is not something what possibly, you definitely learn the skills, but it is something which comes with an attitude, a never give up attitude, or something which kind of ask you to move on. Okay, this is something which I would actually tell my students time and again now, when people, when students come to me and say that they don't know where to go. And you just mentioned something right now, Silpa ma'am, where it was a very lovely quote. I'm not really able to repeat that again. Can you please repeat that? Because I want students to hear this again. Please.
Which one?
Requesting.
Make familiar strange or
Yes, yes, yes.
which we stand by, right? Because from a very young age, you are sort of accustomed to a lot of things. You're socialized in very specific ways. But when you come to a bachelor's level, you have to sort of slowly unlearn a lot of them that you have learned, right? So you have to slowly make what is familiar a little strange. And in the process, you're also learning things that are new, which were not exposed so far, right? So the strange is also slowly becoming familiar. So that's what I meant to say. Yeah.
But you know what? You have actually kind of you have just kind of simplified their journey forward in such a simple way. And yes, I think students just make a note. This is something which is going to be your journey ahead. Now, with the clarity of which students or who should be really opting for this particular program, I think that the immediate next questions which a parent would actually have in mind, okay, is about the fact that what exactly the academic structure would look like. We are really looking at right now here, the jargon for it, or a technical word for it, is a holistic development. Okay, a student who is not only developing skills, but the person or the individual is actually learning skills, ensuring that he's getting a 360 view, as Professor Anand mentioned about the helicopter view. Okay, so what exactly would be the academic structure? At the same time, what are we looking at in this 4-year program? What are we looking at as a major minor options? Can you shed a little light on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to start with the
Go ahead,
response. And of
please.
course, Professor Venkat and Professor Unnithan would add. So like Professor Anand started, right? So our goal is to create people who are also thinkers, because we're currently facing a lot of ambiguities, whether that in the socio-political context, in the context of business environment. So we want to create people who are ready to face an ambiguous environment where there are a lot of uncertainties. So structure and the program curriculum also closely resonate with this approach of ours. That's why we have a very strong interdisciplinary orientation, because we firmly believe that it is important to have an interdisciplinary approach to solve the current contemporary problems. It's very difficult to just understand problems from a single discipline standpoint, because you might miss out a lot of nuances. So that's the larger orientation of our program, but I'd be happy to walk you through the structure. So it's spread across 8 semesters, and each semester carries about 24 credits. The first 2 years are meant to build a very strong foundation. So you will see courses such as business and management, fundamentals of economic analysis, sociology and anthropology, the art of mathematics, computation and artificial intelligence, and even poetry and literature. So the holistic is a term that we are time and again using, but it gives you a multifaceted view of what is happening in society. But then as you move forward, the curriculum becomes more rigorous and more management focused. You have courses like strategic management, operations and supply chain management, corporate finance, leadership, innovation and design thing. These all come in the later part of the course in the program. And these are very similar to what you'd find in an MBA foundation year. So we are not compromising. In fact, we are attempting to provide students with an MBA level education even at their bachelor's. Now, the final year is completely customizable with electives, so minors. And students complete also an internship and research dissertation if they're interested. And we'd also have a very strong community project in their third semester. So we'd want to make it experiential. We don't want to just, give them bookish knowledge, which is a very important part. Content is important. You need to understand your discipline, but it's also important that it's experiential. So by the time they graduate, they've built strong critical thinking skills, analytical skills, communication skills, leadership capabilities. And here we are talking about leadership which is grounded in empathy, in being responsible, in being socially sensitive, being environmentally sensitive, and a very strong sense of being a responsible citizen overall, right? So it's a multifaceted program in that sense, in terms of its design. Now, in terms of the specific minors, we have identified 6 areas. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is one of them. Economics and public policy is another. Finance and big data. Liberal studies and management, again, we are hoping to sort of, add a lot of color and a lot of perspective with such courses too. Then marketing, sales, and digital promotion. And finally, psychology and behavioral sciences. So this would give them a stronger footing in a minor area while, to sort of complement whatever they have laid in the core major areas. Now, in terms of experiential, I just also want to walk you through the fact that we have an experiential component like a community project, which comes in the third semester. Now, this is topped up with a full internship program, which happens in the 7th semester. And then, of course, if they choose to do a dissertation project, that's also an entire semester devoted to a fully fledged, research intensive dissertation project with the faculty. Now, this is the scheme in a nutshell, but if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. And of course, if I missed something, Professor Unnithan and Professor Venkat will add on to that.
No, that is pretty comprehensive. And maybe if you would like, we can also share the course structure with you so that you don't miss out on anything Professor Shilpa mentioned.
When it comes to the course structure, we will ensure the course structure is something which is there in the comment section. We would make sure that it is there. So when all the students who are watching this and we are talking about the course structure, they know where to go and find it, okay, to get a clarity, okay? So this definitely looks interdisciplinary, holistic, ensuring that the students are, going once they are coming out, they are kind of master of all. They know and they have an understanding of all the possible departments. But there's something which a lot of parents, I would say that there is a little bit of greediness here, in parents. I'll tell you how. When it comes to IIMK, IIM Kozhikode and MBA goes hand in hand. Okay. So a parent who is who is kind of asking the child to go ahead with the BMS program, there is a little bit of thought process behind, are we getting a glimpse of the MBA or some kind of a curriculum which is getting blended with the BMS program? Okay. My question is exactly that. Is the BMS program designed with, so that the MBA curriculum is also covered, or can you just throw some light on that particular aspect?
The typical curriculum in an MBA, which they cover in their first year, is about the fundamental courses in business management as well as the supporting courses. So more or less the BMS curriculum in the third year covers the first year of an MBA curriculum, which is taught in most of the universities. And in the final year, if they choose the management related minors, say for example, sales and marketing, they will cover that particular discipline in considerable depth, which would be enough for them to probably land a good job. So that's the way we have designed it. And subsequently, like let's say after a BTech, a lot of students, they get into a job. very few of them might pursue a higher studies if they choose to do so.
Right.
So maybe over a period of time, after a few years of work experience, we would want them to kind of complete an MBA to learn more about management. So there is also a pertinent question. What do we teach in an MBA? Shall we teach leadership? Shall we teach strategic thinking? Or shall we teach how to work on a spreadsheet? So we believe that an MBA is better utilized when you have a little bit more of exposure in a particular, multiple job role. So they know what an organization is, they know what management is. So BMS would equip them to either go for higher studies, or we would want them, some of them, to be entrepreneurs, and it would equip them to get a job, which is more or less the same level as an MBA student, because we have 4 years to work with them. So if they want to do an MBA in future, after a few years of experience, I think that is certainly possible. But at the same time, we are not packaging an MBA. MBA is not what you call the lure that we promise them. Oh, you join the program. We want them to join Bachelor of Management Studies. That is our vision, and that's our program. We are not offering an MBA.
I think that's very loud and clear. Okay. Uh, However, my next question, okay, is about the way the education system is going. We are moving towards more skill based. Okay. And now, if you look at each and every program, it is actually focused on the students developing skills, because eventually that's the core of when you are sitting for the placements or when you're looking out for a job. The employer looks at what kind of skills you have developed. Okay. That becomes a very important aspect for any program delivery. As IIM Kozhikode, when the BMS program is being delivered, what key skills can we expect the students to learn through the BMS program? Your students will develop.
Maybe Professor Venkat, after teaching a semester in this program, you might be better equipped to manage that question.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a pop at it, right? Very pertinent question, Sanika. See, what do we, and for that, maybe we can compare with what happens normally in as people move towards an MBA. You do a whole 4 years of engineering, or you do 3 years of a BCom, and at the end of it, often when we have a conversation with the candidates who come into an MBA program, they say that we want to be, dealing with managerial problems already. It almost begs a question: is it that in any other technical field or a commerce field, is it that there are no problems to solve? It's almost as if only if you have a tag of an MBA, you might be able to, learn something enough to solve a problem. At the same time, they would yet claim that I'm good at problem solving, so take me for an MBA, right? So what skills? I think more than skills, I would add a word of, being adding capabilities, right? Skills are specific, skills you pick up along the way. So we can look at it from the point of view of, uh, and I'll pick on what Professor Anand mentioned right in the beginning. We want this to be a program where they hit the ground running reasonably so at the end of the 4 years in the field of management. After all, when someone comes to recruit, let's say, an MBA candidate, they are looking at someone who has gone through several years, maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years, maybe with or without some degree of working. If they have worked, they know that they have seen the inside of an organization, which may or may not demystify all that they have learned, or may have nothing to do with all they have learned. Somebody who studied 4 years of engineering in, let's say, in the mechanical space might be working in the IT space, which has got nothing to do with what they have done, right? Now, that is, I would say, a reflection of how industry moves and the evolution along the way. So, we want people to be able to handle situations in a holistic way, right? We want them to be, at the end of the 4 years, be exposed to enough aspects. There will never be enough to say they will be completely comprehensive, but through this program, one skill or capability, I would say, is to be able to connect the dots. Connect the dots between what or amongst what? Connect the dots between what they have learned in their curriculum with whatever the world of management is to be. The world of management can cut across all those three areas that Professor Unnithan had identified, and all the experiential aspects that Professor Shilpa had also mentioned. It is also to be able to have the right attitude. And I go back to connecting the description that Professor Unnithan mentioned about management being an attitude. Because today's times, you're talking about wading through a sea of uncertainty. People often get stuck in thinking that formulas and frameworks can solve everything, right? We want to equip them with a way of thinking through situations, and situations they may or may not have seen before, but yet gives them the confidence to be able to see, chalo, a new problem has come in. Let us sit down and see how we can tackle this. It may or may not be something that they've seen in their textbooks or discussed in their classrooms. So we want to give them. So honestly, Sanika, I'm not sure the word skills might cut it, but I would say we want to at least give them a pop at being confident and capable about handling several situations. We're not saying that they're going to be, nobody, would say that they're all leaders, but maybe what is leadership? What is management? No, there are shades of each other in it, right? So we want them to be confident. We want them to be capable of being able to handle at least shreds of uncertainty, at least situations that may not be completely frameable within a box. And how do we do that? That is by ensuring that we are blending the conceptual aspects with the practical. And so that when they see those things, they know that everything is not perfect in a world the way they might, see it within a textbook. And that is the reason where we blend in experience with the concepts that we bring to the classroom, make them think. And the thinking is to actually, and this actually reflects what Professor Shilpa mentioned, right? Make the familiar strange and make the strange familiar.
Strange familiar.
Because the world is not an, idyllic kind of thing that everything fits perfectly into boxes. So even if we can make them halfway or even quarter way ready for a context where they know that there are many things to be taken into account, the the very fact that they might be, hopefully at the end of the program, be ready to accept the fact that uh, solving problems is not just about putting a formula in, but there are people to be taken into account, there are contexts to be taken into account, there is society to be taken into account. So more and more we make them familiar with the 360 degrees around any situation. I think that is a capability or a confidence to deal with situations is what we would want them to have. My colleague.
Sanika, if I may so add, see, me and Professor Venkat, we belong to what is called a before Google generation. When we were doing our engineering or our MBA, there was no Google, there was no Facebook, no WhatsApp, no instant commerce, and no artificial intelligence, right? So we are teaching subjects which we never studied. And we are doing work with the tools that we have never encountered, before our 50s. Now I am working with AI. I encountered AI in my late 50s. So how do you imagine like a future which is 25 years away and then teach them all the skills which they might require? So what is more important is, we learn. An ability to learn is also important. Maybe Professor Venkat calls it a capability. I might like to call it a meta skill. So the skill to acquire a skill. So that require certain processes and certain approach. But at the same time, let me also reiterate that whatever skills an MBA student, maybe when they graduate at the age of 23 to 24 from a business schools, whatever core skills that they have, we expect that and we assure that a BMS graduate will have the same kind of skills so that they may be able to walk into a role. Well, we cannot accelerate aging. There is, of course, a difference in the worldview of someone who's 25 and someone who's 21. That is something we cannot accelerate. But in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the skills, in terms of their outlook, well, I believe that they'll be ready to take on an MBA. Please understand that we are also running an MBA. And this is also one of the most sought after MBAs in the country. And we will continue to do this MBA. But the advantage is that we get to work 4 years with them. And that too, we get them at a relatively younger age when they are more curious and when they are kind of coming out of schooling and looking forward to what would excite them. So that is significantly an advantage. So probably that I might want to add, to that.
It is such a lovely insight what you both have provided to, I think, the parents who would be watching it. It would be an absolute delight because I think you are also kind of breaking a lot of myths for the parents who are expecting something very different coming. Whatever we listen and the expectations is very different. And I'm glad that right now, whatever we are talking about, that is something which would kind of change the thought process the parents have, whether we call it a skill, okay, or whether we call it a capability or the meta skill. Everything the student would learn, or at least now the generation is as such, we call them Gen Z. It's about experience, okay? They want everything. They want to experience everything, and that's where I think the experiential learning part becomes a very integral aspect for any program. How exactly the IIMK BMS program is looking forward to balance that strong academic foundation with the practical or the experiential learning or the kind of exposure, be it? How exactly are we looking at balancing it with IIMK?
Well, Sanika, I mean, I think we kind of touched on it at a broader level, but essentially every course that we do, you know, we try and connect them to whatever is happening on the ground, or we explain how it makes a difference, right? For example, the question that we ourselves face is why do we need to learn poetry and literature, right? What does
True.
it got to do with management? So we sometimes ask them question, you are expecting to be working in a global world, right? Poetry and literature is kind of the window to culture in many ways, right? How do you learn? Imagine yourself sitting on a flight next to a French person, right? And you're exchanging ideas about your culture and their culture. How do you feel that? How more confident would you feel if you know something about what they do and what they have done? I'm not saying we're covering every literature in every part and corner of the world, but the idea is to lead you to something which hopefully will make them read more, right? Or expose them to different cultures. These are all also part of the experiential part, right? Or if you're doing a course in the fundamentals of business management, if you're doing a course even in languages, right? We have something called functional languages. In different languages, we may give them. We take them. The idea is to take them to places where they will actually converse with a community who speaks only in that language. If you're doing a project, related to, say, business management, which rather than just take it as a bunch of lessons to be introduced them to, we take them to companies, we get them to meet people, we get them to even host events where they can talk to people more frequently right from the beginning. And we are ourselves amazed. We are very happy and very chuffed with the kind of energy that we are having in our first batch. But it's almost like they broke out of the shell at the end of 12th standard, and they're kind of blooming already. The kind of energy, the kind of maturity, many of them. Of course, they have many, maybe a long way to go. So our purpose and our design, rather, not just the purpose, our design is to ensure that each and every subject that they're exposed to, we give them an experience of talking to people, taking them to companies, making it as experiential as possible. So that is part of the course. And then alongside, we will have both extracurricular as well as co-curricular kind of activities where they get to experience a lot of these things, right? So the more we are able to blend these practicums and these exposures right from semester one, we believe that their curiosity will be more than kindled, and they will be able to ask us questions, much earlier than what they might otherwise do.
Lovely. Uh, Anybody who would like to add anything? Professor Anand, Professor Silpa?
Just want to just add to what Professor Venkat said about, so any course that you take, right? We have a cosmopolitan essence in our mind, right? You're not just prepping them for working in this country. It's just for the entire world, because the problems are such that one country cannot solve a lot of problems, right? So this global perspective is throughout taken through whichever course or component that we design. So that's a central emphasis that we have, which requires them to be exposed to other settings, and simulation sometimes can be helpful. Case-based learnings, exposing them to multiple settings, not just business, but also cultural, social, linguistic, religious. So it helps them be exposed to different people and better human beings in terms of respecting different individualities and different ways of living, which is very important when you are in the field of business, right? Because we're not all the same. So that's something that's the experiential, that we also define it differently, slightly, right? Then, of course, continuous assessment is there throughout. And many times people do individual projects or group projects, which again, you have to work amongst your group. You're also producing knowledge, but at the same time, learning another skill. How do you work in teams, right? How do you liaison between your groups in terms of resonating with the ideas, or maybe downplaying some ideas, amplifying certain others, etc. And so it's a mix that is not confined to one aspect of the program, right? Again, everybody was responding to the skill question. It's throughout the curriculum that, this experience is not confined to one course or a couple of courses. It's spread across. But community project is another thing I want to amplify, right? The larger principle is also to fix problems, not just for us, but also for the larger society. So how can we sort of channelize whatever we are learning inside the class to fix social problems, say social intervention, social enterprise, etc. So it's a multidimensional sort of understanding surrounding experience as well, if I may add to that. That's all.
That is definitely very in-depth. And again, I think for more than students, I think it's the parents who would get the clarity right now after this particular question. Now, this particular next question of mine, which I'm asking you, is specifically for students. Okay. A lot of my students, when they apply for colleges, first thing which really scares them is the fact that if it is IIM, that means the rigor would be way too much. Okay. And that is a lot of students kind of get scared with this particular fact that there will be too much rigor, workload will be too much. So I want to ask you how students often kind of, this is something they are scared of very clearly. So what exactly is the academic rigor we are expecting here? And also what they can expect in terms of the workload and the learning environment?
In terms of rigor, of course, it's very distinctly different from the spoon feeding kind of rote learning, as people would call it at the +2 level, right? We are not doing that anymore. We're trying to make them, or, sort of groom them to be independent learners. So we give them material. Of course, we walk them through the processes of learning. So the skill acquired here is how do you approach a topic or a content? And then, of course, you would get the basics from our side and then elevate it to another level altogether. So students can expect that, this regime of learning is coming to an end, where you're given notes, you're spoon-fed. That's coming to a very abrupt end when you come to a BMS program. It's another level of learning. So you would be exposed to cases as well as academic articles, depending on the sort of disciplines that you're in each semesters, which, there is a gradation to them. They'll be taken from simple to complex over the course of the semester, but of course with complete faculty support. And in that sense, your learning is becoming more disciplined. You are learning to write better, read better, and produce knowledge better. So it's not just that you're learning to give exams, right? Or you're learning to get better percentage in the exam. That's not what we're looking for. We are creating an environment here where you're learning so that you can become part of the knowledge, and you can create change by participating in the knowledge production. So it's not just that it's a passive. We don't want learning to be a passive exercise at IIMK. So it's very active, it's very participatory in that regard, because we firmly believe that everybody has something to add to a conversation. So we firmly believe in collaborative models of learning, but we are completely against this regimented knowledge acquisition where you just read and reproduce. That's not how we are doing it. So that will be a slightly bit of a learning curve during the initial days, because the hand-holding process is there, but you have to slowly develop your scholarly voice, your individuality as a scholar or a manager, which would happen, of course, through the course of the 4 year. But that's where we want to end up with them, right? To develop a personality in terms of your knowledge and your scholarship, not just, learn and write a few exams here and there. If that's that, I'll come back, and that's where I want to start.
Wonderful process, Shilpa. The learning, the rigor doesn't come from the amount of material that you allow to remember. In IIMs, mostly we have a lot of open book examinations so that they don't have to remember and they can bring their notes. Not all of them, but some of them. It is not about the number of textbooks that you have to carry. So if you look at that, I think, from plus two, when they join the first year of a BMS program, they'll be a lot relieved in terms of the extent of work that they would do in a plus two. I remember when my children were in plus two, the situation is pretty bad with a lot of notebooks and a lot of material. Besides that, the rigor comes from their engagement they have with a particular subject. Their ability to go beyond the expectation that the professor will provide all the answers and the professor will train them to pass the examination. From there onwards, developing an ability to expect the unexpected and then think through the problem and then develop solutions which are quite unique. So if they don't do that, it's not that in their managerial career they are going to experience the same situations that is there in the textbook. It will be quite unique situation. So they have to start thinking. They have to start learning to think about it. So that might initially be a little bit of a shock for people who are used to a school system. But however, they are in the right hands. We are not selecting them to let them go. And it's up to us to ensure that they get trained in that transition. In the first semester and the second semester, it is the transition that go. And generally, we faculty are extremely patient with them. And one of the first things probably they might find it quite surprising is that we expect them to ask a lot of questions. Usually in many academic institutions, it is a professor who asks questions or the teacher who asks questions. So here they would expect, to be always asking questions and making a lot of presentations. How would someone becomes an excellent communicator unless they communicate a lot?
True.
So a lot of classes are discussion-oriented classes. We will give them a problem and we will ask them, okay, if you were in the situation, what will be that answer? So suddenly, when they are expected to answer questions, they are expected to come up with unique insights and ask questions to faculty, which is sometimes rather surprising to many of the students. How can I ask questions to faculty? We seek their questions. If they don't ask, we will probe them. Why don't you ask a question? So that pedagogy is what makes that a little, surprisingly new, which they might need a little bit of an adjustment. So, Professor Venkat, you might remember in the first few sessions, you must have taken a case study on wine.
Yes.
That's what you told me. Yeah.
Yeah. See, just to add on, I think both of them have covered, the essentials absolutely. The thing is, rigor is not just about writing an exam and getting some marks out of it. If they see it like that, it only gives a very limited view, right? So taking them out of their comfort zone to some extent, but being ready to delve deeper into it, the rigor comes from that. And there is, of course, we can't take away a sense of competitiveness that will be there within the batch, within the cohort, right? And but each one, there is a space for each and every one. It is not that we want to make the whole thing stereotyped. It is not that we want everybody cut out in the same mold. Everyone is a different individual, and but yet there are some expectations that what they may have to do, what they may have to be exposed to be able to be in the process of what Professor Unnithan said, that meta learning, or do you know how to learn, rather than so that takes a lot of things. So it's not that we throw them into the deep end without, and it's not that sort. We slowly introduce them to that. And also the pedagogy itself, right? It is not like a typical university system where we say that every professor teaches everything in exactly the same way. There is enough leeway for different professors and faculty to come with their way of teaching things or introducing things, and that sort of itself exposes them to different kinds of uncertainties, if you want to have it, right? How do you deal with one Professor Unnithan, and how do you deal with a different Professor Shilpa and a different Professor Venkat or Vipin? There are different things itself. That is also part of knowing how to manage and wade through uncertainty. And one of the things that we often hear from people who would end up recruiting young talent is that there's a lot of IQ that you can find, but often you don't find a lot of EQ as well, right? And because there are so much expectations that come through with a very, very rigid kind of program. So through the
Mm.
process, we also want them to be, it's not that we are here to, teach them EQ or raise their IQ or anything. That is a process. Each one is different. But we have to give them enough opportunities to be able to find themselves a little bit more. And all these parts, that we bring to them will help them do it, is our belief.
We find them to be quite enterprising and much more open to experience. So the openness to experience is a lot more than some of the older ones. So if you're teaching the 45-year-old, you will see that their mind is rather closed. And it's very difficult to teach them through a very different method. But 18-year-olds are pretty much open and they take it to it like fish to water.
With whatever all of you have said, it clearly kind of, as a parent, if I have to hear this as a parent, it's honestly a little overwhelming, because I know that my kid, because I'm sure a lot of students who would be joining IIMK would have not even moved out of the house, and here they are actually going to stay 4 years away from home. Trust me, when Professor Venkat was speaking, Professor Anand was speaking, and Professor Silpa, when you are speaking, as a parent, I feel that it's something that just came in very naturally, that I know it will be in good hands. Because what you are trying to inculcate in them is something which eventually would make them as a go-getter, but somebody who would even understand the the little nuances which they really need to kind of held on or need to hold on before when they actually move into the leadership role or into the business. So that's something which I felt, and I'm sure the students who would be looking at, you don't really have to worry about the rigor, because definitely uh, they know and they would make you fly, but eventually they would also keep you grounded. Okay. Now, with on that particular note, we have been speaking a lot about the case studies. We have been speaking a lot about the opportunities. Though there would be skills which they develop, we are also looking at the opportunities like internships and the projects which we spoke about. The third semester, Professor Silpa, you spoke about the social internship, the social project. What other opportunities apart from this, or what other uh, you know options student would have with this particular program? Can we speak a lot on that, or a little bit on that?
Maybe I can jump in here. One thing maybe we've not talked about is IMK has got an incubator, right? And to begin with itself, when we were talking to many of the students, there's a query was already there. Will this help my child become an entrepreneur? Different people look at it different way. And we are introducing them to the idea. Remember what Professor Anand said in the beginning. We don't want them just to be job seekers. We want those of them who are driven to be even job creators. But then there is a process, there's a certain understanding that needs to be there. It's not that we think up an idea and then that becomes a successful idea in a commercial sort of way, right? So we have to, of course, handhold them, teach them the ropes, and that is one experiential aspect where IMK has got a lot of experience in. We've been running this incubator for more than 10 years now, and we are introducing them to that idea early on, right? In small ways, in progressive ways, and that'll keep happening. And our idea is to engage the BMS students or expose them a lot more to such ideas. And we already have students coming up and saying this, I got this brilliant idea. Now, how do I make this work? Some of them even come to us and say that, can I leave the program right now? Let me go and, it's just an idea that I fear that if I don't do it right now, that market might go away and so on. So I'm just saying that there is so much of, since you mentioned parents a lot, right, Sanika? I think we underestimate the drive and the talent and the energy in this generation, right? And our orientation or our approach is to be able to give them expression to that. And I'll repeat again, when you talked about rigor, are they getting to be exposed to something too soon, too many, too much kind of thing? No, that's not the idea. We want everyone to find themselves while they're here for this long time. Everyone doesn't have to be like the person sitting next to them, right? But yet we want them to know that there are multifaceted aspects when you talk about managing in whichever role they might be, right? Let them find themselves. So there are many things so this is one aspect of entrepreneurship. The other aspect, I think Professor Shilpa has pretty much covered it. There is case competitions that no we allow them. I mean, of course, we would guide them to pick and choose what kind of competitions to go to. It's not that everybody is in a rat race to do something or fill up their biodatas. So, and we're glad that we have 4 years to be able to guide them along the way. So there are many things that they will have exposure to while we go along, and we are sure that they will find themselves through that, and why they'll find themselves where they are best at, so that they can blossom as well as they wish they would want to.
Sanika, as a parent who kind of endured the agony of children leaving home and then making their own career, I have two girls. My advice to parents is that they should learn to trust their wards. There is a time when they will seek their own career paths. For the first time, they will leave their home and be in a hostel. And of course, they will make some mistakes. Who doesn't? All of us made mistakes, right? But they are much better than we think they are. So you need to have faith in them.
Absolutely. And I would not deny to what you have said. With a good clarity on the program delivery, where the program is, has internships and projects and case studies. There's one aspect, which is the student exchange program, which is something helps the two students to kind of, again, understand the culture and how exactly the other, uh, side, the delivery is being done for the program. Do we have any such student exchange program with IIMK as well?
We have multiple collaborations with the universities abroad, many in US, many in Europe, a lot more in Europe, and some in the Far East Asia. So usually the student exchange works like this. The students in their seventh semester or sixth semester get an opportunity to when they spend a semester abroad. So that depends on their performance. That depends on the meeting the terms and conditions of that agreement. It's not for all, but it's for those high performing students who are interested in spending a semester abroad. We allow that credit transfer and we facilitate a student exchange. So
Okay.
this is very common in an MBA, but in MBA, in IIM, it being a trimester system, this student exchange is limited to around 10 weeks. So here we have almost an entire semester available for them. So we have existing arrangements with many successful business schools, but at the same time, we are also cultivating more relationships, more contacts. It's an ongoing process, but it happens in their third year.
Okay. So when we are talking about, I think we spoke in depth in terms of the delivery, how the academic aspect of IIM K BMS program. But there's something which is the fun part, okay, which normally a lot of students look forward for. Okay, and I think that's where the learning comes from, which is the campus life. Okay, I have a lot of my students who are currently in IIMK. I follow them on social media, and I can definitely say the campus life in IIMK, where my students are, is pretty vibrant. They are having fun when it comes to days, when it comes to festivals. But I wanted to understand from you that beyond academics, how does exactly the campus life is? Let parents know about it, how exactly the campus life is, about the clubs, the committees, and what kind of activities are happening at campus.
See, sometimes in marketing, we say Dubai is an airport with a city attached to it. So like that, we have a campus with an entire city attached to it. The program is hosted in Kochi, one of the most vibrant cities in Kerala. It's a very cosmopolitan city. We consciously took a decision so that we host the program in Kochi. So they are in the middle of the city, and they have all the opportunities that are available which a city would provide. And
Right.
particularly the enterprising students, what happens is when you have some 120 boys and girls, all of them young and dynamic, is there any shortage of any activity or any fun? There will not be any shortage of it. Maybe Professor Shilpa is kind of like more interacting with them on a daily basis. she may be able to throw a little bit more light into it.
Now, of course, I'll try. I mean, there is a lot of excitement in discovering a new place, new people, new food, and all of that, right? So initial days, a lot of time is spent into understanding the space. And Kochi always hosts the Bi-nale, so this is also a particular moment in the time of history where you see a lot of art, artists, a lot of cosmopolitan crowd in and around. Some of our students also go and do volunteering there, so it's
Lovely.
so the many different opportunities which are not otherwise, in some other settings. So Kochi, we're very fortunate to have these unique sort of opportunities to students for to interact and socialize. Apart from that, we also have student council and student committees to also sort of cater to the activities within the campus. So we have 5 dedicated committees. They focus on industry academy interaction, care, sports, cultural committee, a public relations committee. So sort of we are equipping them to handle their activities on their own, create a life and vibrancy around the time at IIM Kozhikode. So through that, they're also learning quite a lot, right? It's through their interaction that they're learning much more than what they would learn otherwise. So we're very vibrant sort of a setting, and the council and committee adds a lot of color to that activity. And the city, of course, gives the perfect backdrop for whatever is happening in IIMK campus.
Lovely. Something which I am asking out of curiosity here. Okay. IIMK itself is, I would say, it's a brand which is established. Okay. People trust the program because they know that it's coming from IIMK. How competitive was the first batch? Because students who got selected, I am sure it's 120 students together with some real good academic background. How competitive is the first batch? Because peer learning must be at its peak, because that's where is the place you learn, maximum, which is your peer group.
One word, extremely competitive, but in a good way.
Which is nice. Okay. Now, after completing, see, we did this, I think we kind of covered every aspect of our program when we were discussing. But once the students completed BMS program, we also spoke about this, but let's just, deep dive into the career paths which a student would be able to. We spoke about the student trying or, looking at being entrepreneurs as well. But what exactly would be the career paths a BMS student who would be graduating from IIMK would be able to look at?
What we have is in both Kozhikode as well as in this Kochi campus, we have an arrangement called a CARE. We don't call it placements. It's called CARE, Corporate Access, Readiness, and Engagement. So they are under the guidance of a faculty, and there is a team of faculty looking after this activity. And we also hire external experts. So they work with the students over a period of time to kind of improve their self-presentation skills, their communication skills, vet their resume, like guide them to the kind of right activities which would make them attractive to the employer. So this is the kind of work that we do over the entire duration of the program, and the placements happen in the final year. That's the 4th year. What
Right.
sort of career aspiration they can look for is, I am very confident by looking at their performance in the first year that they should be able to kind of get into almost any role which a company might consider an MBA for, an MBA without much of an experience. Like there are fresh MBAs. They are good enough for that. So I am from the marketing background. I would say they'll be good in getting into a sales role or a marketing role, which or in multiple industries, in consumer goods or in other industries. They'll be good as analysts. So that they can also consider an analyst role. They can look at finance if that is what excites them. So it is, BMS is a general management program, even though they have an option to specialize by opting for a minor. It's a general management program. And as of now, have they understood their career path? No, they are still exploring. But by the time they are in their 3rd year, probably they will find what they would like. And we are also arranging frequent interactions with the people from the industry. We have one of the largest alumni in the country. These alumni are also hand-holding them. So the challenge now is that they should discover what they like. Probably then we could do a better job of grooming them to that. So as of now, we are in the process of allowing them a self-discovery. And many of our faculty are also from the industry. Like Professor Venkat, for example, had more than a couple of decades in the industry after his MBA. Like most of the faculty are with that particular background. So we are also able to help them in a way. Professor Venkat, would you like to add something?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Sanika, it actually goes back to what you're saying, and I would say that there is no limitation at all. You are talking about what do people look for to hire? If I am a recruiter, I would want two things. One is the learnability, and one is
Right.
confidence, and the third is the right attitude. So here we are trying to give them well-rounded individuals. You let people come out from a certain kind of system that they're all used to, but now through a process of discovery, we are trying to present them almost like a finishing school. People who have the confidence, who hopefully have the right attitude. We have selected them for that. And as they go along, they will groom themselves along the way. And of course, specific skills that they will pick along as well, along the way as well, and give them the right exposure to different things so that they can see problems in a holistic sort of way. Don't you think this will be a ready godsend to most employers out there, right? So functions, specific functions, yes, it may be an analyst, it may be a banking job, it may be a finance related function, it may be a sales related function, but all of them require for a future manager or a leader the ability to be able to have that presence, the ability to maybe think on their feet, the ability to see problems in a full 360-degree mode. So this is what we are hoping to make them hoping to lead them to. And I'm sure that every function, every company, every organization, and this could not just be business organizations. It could be a social entrepreneurship. It could be an NGO. And there may be even some people who wish to go deeper and even do a PhD beyond that, because we are allowing that sense of self-degree as well. After all, this is an undergraduate program, right?
True.
4 years is a long time to open up that thinking, and somebody might even go deep into languages or something very different. So I think the career paths are very difficult to limit, to say that these will be the 2, 3, 4 career paths. I think the whole world can be their oyster, you know. So
Fantastic. Now, 19th of May. Okay, so just kind of giving you and getting my students back to reality. If they would be listening to uh, so much information and kind of getting motivated with it, don't forget 19th of May is the deadline for the IIMK admission test. Okay, if you are looking at filling this particular form, which you should, there is no, there is no if and but. This is something which you should definitely attempt. But one thing which I'm sure there will be a question which would be there at the back of your mind, that what qualities or what we should be really preparing for when we are filling the form. What exactly my students should be preparing for? What should be they should be gearing up for when they are filling the form? What's in store for them?
The form is pretty straightforward. Now, once I submit the form, then we will have this unenviable task of selecting 120 from a few thousands. So the process is like this. There is an entrance test with two different sections. One is basically the quantitative ability, numerical ability. So the content is corresponding to what anybody would cover in their 10th standard, basic arithmetic, mathematics. So that one cannot do management with innumeracy. Like they should have some clarity on the fundamental arithmetics and mathematics. The second part is the verbal ability.
Mm-hmm.
So the structure more or less follow the CAT, the Common Admission Test, or the GRE or the GMAT. So in terms of the depth, probably it would anybody who is a good student in 10th standard may be able to do that, given they have enough time. But the questions might have some twist, so that are they able to find solutions rather than simply apply a formula. So based on the test, we will shortlist usually 10 times the number of seats that we have. We will shortlist around 1,200, and then they will have to attend for an interview in Mumbai, in Delhi, in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, and in Kozhikode. And a panel of 2 faculty members will be interviewing them, and we will spend maybe 20 minutes with them. So we want to find them, what sort of people they are. It will be just like a friendly conversation. We want to find more about them, learn more about them. Well, what do they like doing in their life? What are their thoughts? What are their interests? So this is what the process is like. We want primarily motivated people, willing to explore, like willing to take up a challenge, who's pleasant, who's pleasing, who can communicate rather well, right? Who is able to think on their feet and is not stumped by a question because they are not prepared for that question. Interview is a conversational interview. We don't give them a list of questions and to prepare themselves ahead. So it's like a conversational interview. So it is very friendly, like you can ask the previous batch who attended the interview. They will be able to see that it's not a stress interview. It's not like we are trying to create, anxiety in them. It's just a conversational interview. So this is actually the process. Like I would say, trust yourself, be at your best, perform at your best, and then allow us to make a judgment. So we are pretty good at that.
I'm sure with this, after listening to this, parents must have definitely, because when I'm listening to all three of you talking, it's really my parent side or my parent, as a parent where I am actually kind of able to respond. And that's why I said that if I am a parent, I know that my child would be in the right,
You
in the
know
right
what?
hands.
During the interviews, we have more trouble in managing the parents. They are much more anxious than the wards. So
I agree.
we kind of allow them to stay with them, have a separate hall, and we'll have a couple of people to reassure them and then give them tea, coffee, so that they are also not feeling very anxious. But these boys and girls, we don't find that they are panicking. They are pretty much all right. What do you say, Professor Venkat? What's your experience last time?
Absolutely, absolutely. And to add to what Professor Anand said, I would say we want them to be themselves. We don't want them to be presenting a version of themselves as if this is a formula that will get you through. This is not a game, because after all, this is our attempt is to try and help them find themselves, right? And that process starts right here. You know, why do they even want to, come to a BMS, right? And that goes back. It's not just a question to be answered in a very canned set of words that they put together, that if I write these set of words and if I say the same thing, it'll impress the panel. No, that's not about it. It's about holding a conversation. It's about letting them express themselves, and we would want them to be themselves. No, there is no judgment involved here, right? Yes, of course it's an assessment, but there is no judgment involved in here that this is good and that is bad. No, we're just trying to understand, is this program a fit for them, or are they a fit for the program? It's a two-way conversation. So I think a conversation is deep, and sometimes, from last year's experience, we have probably enjoyed the conversation, more than maybe the candidates themselves. And sometimes we forget ourselves. Only the fact that we have to keep to a certain timeline when we finish in a day, so many people sometimes hold us back. But we had some lovely conversations, and I think parents just need to let them express themselves, in their best way.
They are pretty good, the children. These candidates are pretty good. They are extremely candid. And they are not very politically correct either. And you ask them a question, well, they will give you the clear, forthright answer. But if they are very nervous, maybe doing a couple of mock interviews would help them. But then the questions are like, we are not going to ask them any general awareness questions. Like, that's not. We are asking about themselves, what sort of schooling they had, what do they do, like what excites them. That's the kind of question, right? There is no need to prepare. Just walk in, be comfortable, and have a chat with us.
So basically, the interview, the subject matter would be you. And that's what you really need to be prepared for. The form filling would be a tad bit easy, but the process after that is what you really need to work. Make sure you're focused, make sure you are little stable headed, focused, and you just know what you are talking. At times, students are too nervous where the connection between here and the tongue completely misfires. And that's what you really need to hold on. One, as we are approaching towards the end, I think we covered all the aspect. But one particular question which I have is the fact that is IIMK planning to launch a full-fledged campus where residents will be on campus as well?
Yes.
Originally, when we started with this idea, we were imagining this to be a city campus where students are also allowed to kind of come from wherever they are. And we were not planning to integrate an entire academic infrastructure with the residences along with it. But then when the first batch joined, we found out that the students as well as the parents prefer them to be in hostel, and we had to arrange hostels. Now, the institute is now planning to set up a fully self-contained campus in the Cochin itself, not away from Cochin. And Professor Venkat is now leading this initiative of locating a suitable facility, and then maybe he will have more information to share on it.
Yeah, so definitely, while we wanted a good idea not to sort of, wait till it came out, and that's exactly the idea with which we began. But now we have seriously onto it. I think in the next 2 to 2.5 years, before our current first batch goes out, we should have a full-fledged campus, because the idea is to again see if this is what people are looking for. We will have an experience for them, very much in Cochin and in and around Cochin itself. We are, as we speak, we are looking at multiple choices. The process is already on. Of course, being a system within a system like an IIM, which has got stakeholders at the government, we have to follow certain processes. We cannot snap our fingers and get something done overnight. So it'll take a little time. But in the meantime, we are very aware and very alive to the fact that we need to provide students, expanded facilities as more batches join us, allow them the ability to, be at a place where they can work together, play together. A lot of those things are also on way, while we, of course, keep ensuring, that they are in a safe place. So we are constantly looking out for that. But definitely, the one word answer to your question is yes, and it should be there, at the soon as possible. Maybe a couple of years, between 2.5 years. We are hoping that things will. We are looking at all options. We are looking at options where which should bring in the element of proximity to the city, at the same time proximity for transportation. We are looking at what kind of facility will help us hit the ground running. So we are looking at a plethora of possibilities where we have absolute land, where we build up scratch from the ground up. We are looking at possibilities where there is already some kind of a campus existing and we can take it up. And so all those possibilities are on, and IIMK is not sparing any resources whatsoever, right? Our director is very clear that this is one of our star programs, and we will not leave any stone unturned in ensuring that this will happen.
Lovely. And I think with this, I have exhausted all my questions, because whatever questions I was asked by parents and students, and what I had out of curiosity, I have answered, kind of questioned and asked everything. And thank you so much, Professor Anand, Professor Venkat, and Professor Silpa, for answering every question in detail, making sure that when my parents and students would be watching it, they would have absolutely clarity in terms of what exactly they are getting into. Okay. And as we learned a lot, I think this particular conversation, it definitely had a motive, but I can definitely tell you that as a mentor, I have learned a lot, from all three of you. And this is something which I would pass on to my students. And thank you so much for taking out time. I would have a lot of my students next year joining IIMK. And I would be in touch with them to see how exactly the second batch is performing. And I normally do mapping a journey where every year the same set of students are asked about how the journey looks like now. Okay, when there is a new program. And hopefully next year, the same set of students would be giving me more info on terms of how their perspective has changed and how they have grown in the program. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much,
much.
ma'am.
Thank you very much.